Okay, so this is just going to be a super quick, like low effort video, but I wanted to tell you about something. I'm going to try not to bump the camera too much. I want to tell you about something that I've been meaning to like talk about for a long time, but I have not gotten to it for so long that it's become kind of irrelevant. And that is the clocks that I use in my house. So years ago, I selected, I make that sound like I did some complicated bidding process. I stumbled upon these and fell in love. Um, the Primex SNS synchronized clocks. And so they are what I use throughout my house. Um, what I like about these clocks is that they're standard analog clocks. They look very normal. They are synchronized clocks, and when you hear Primex, you will probably think of their, I believe, VHF wireless system. And I've actually, what originally got me looking at Primex is that there's a hospital near my house that uses Primex VHF clocks. So it occurred to me that I could probably just get a Primex VHF clock and then set it to, the frequency that their transmitter runs on. And I could probably just sort of like bootleg the time from the hospital because the signal is pretty good at my house. But in the course of pursuing that plan, I discovered that these SNS clocks exist, and what's different about these is that these are actually they are NTP based. So this clock connects to my Wi-Fi and performs NTP time synchronization. And that's awesome because it requires no supporting infrastructure. I do, in my case, I use a local NTP server, but I mean, you wouldn't even have to. You could just use like ntpool.org with one of these clocks. I've done that before, and it works fine. So it's very cool to be able to have synchronized clocks just using your existing Wi-Fi without needing, to have like a transmitter installed. Now, the reason that I've been using these Primex SNS is because at the time that I found out about these, the series had recently been discontinued by Primex. That meant that a lot of institutions that had these were removing them, and so they were frequently showing up on eBay out of hospitals mostly at very reasonable prices. Like you can see, this is not in great physical shape. I've been meaning to try polishing this front cover to see if I can make it not be sort of um, a little milky. But you know what? Like when it's up on the wall, you can't even tell. So it looks fine when it's hung up. But I probably got this clock for $30 maybe. And there are other vendors of analog NTP synchronized clocks, but they're all basically over $200 that I know of. There's a popular one, it might be Time Machines, that I think are reselling a Chinese model. Now, I've gone to Alibaba and found the same thing. So I'll tell you that Time Machines, if I'm remembering the right company, they're not marking it up much. Like it's pretty much, it's still well over $100 to import directly from China. So it's hard to get something like this at a low price. This product line has now been discontinued for a long time. I think all of these clocks that I have are over, in fact, I think well over a decade old, and they are starting to develop problems, which is one of the reasons that I would not recommend buying these at this point. The other reason is just that the supply has dried up. Like lately, when I've looked on eBay at these clocks, specifically the Primex SNS, not the radio synchronized clocks, they have been there's been a lot fewer of them and they've been a lot more expensive. So kind of the period when you could just pick these up for peanuts, I think is over. So let's just talk a little bit about these, and then I'll get to the other reason why I wouldn't recommend buying these today. You will notice if you're paying attention that the second hand on this is running unusually slow. It's only advancing every 2 seconds. And if you ever see these Primex clocks, it's useful to know that they slow roll the second hand to indicate error states. That's kind of weird, right? But in this case, this clock has lost its programming, I think. The batteries in it died. I put new batteries in it. It takes 4D cells. They last for, I would say, around a year, is my experience. And I don't think that these are supposed to lose their programming when the battery dies, but I have at least two of them that do. I have to reprogram them every time I replace the batteries. I bet if I cracked it open, there's probably a coin cell battery in here that's gone flat, is what's happened. But I just haven't bothered to do that. So yeah, if you see a Primex clock where the second hand is running too slow, that means that something is wrong with it. And if you actually look in the manual, there's different like patterns. Like if every 5 seconds it skips forward 5 seconds, that means that it's lost its network connection and has not been able to synchronize for I think more than 7 days. Um, but this every 1 second, the reason it's doing this specifically is because I started up this clock in programming mode. And it just that this is how it behaves when it's in programming mode. So what do I mean by programming mode? This has an Ethernet interface, but it is really strictly for programming. I think it might be possible to get these to run long term over Ethernet, but it's not what the software really wants you to do. In fact, normally when you turn these on, this Ethernet interface is completely disabled. Like there's not even a link pulse on it. You have to specifically start the clock up in programming mode for the Ethernet interface to work. And the way that you do that is by holding this green button when you insert the batteries. So I'm going to hook up an Ethernet cable to this and pull a battery, hold this button. It beeped. There's definitely a capacitor in there because it kind of works for a minute after you take out the batteries. So I'm just waiting a minute to make sure that's discharged. But insert the battery with the button held. It beeps once. Now we're in programming mode. We got to wait for a little bit for it to finish booting up, basically. But we should see that the network interface comes up on it after a bit. Do I have a link light? Yeah, I have a link light now. Um, and oh, this, I got to do this. So you might notice that I am running uh, the three beeps. It beeps in programming mode as it like makes way through its boot up progress. I think three beeps means that it's finished like setting up the network interface. Um, Although that's interesting, so you'll notice that I'm running Windows in a VM here. Yeah, actually the link light has gone up. You're gonna find out here, these clocks are kind of fiddly. Like I often have to make multiple attempts to get them connected in programming mode. Yeah, so I'm just gonna try that again. I'm just gonna pull the battery, push the button, hold it, reinsert the battery. We get a beep, so we should be starting up in programming mode now. So I'm running a Windows VM because of course the programming tool is Windows only. These were sold for use with like an enterprise management platform that's called I want to say it's called OneView. That's a little confusing because some of these are branded SNS, some of them are branded OneView. I think OneView actually replaced SNS, but now it's also discontinued is maybe what's going on. I found someone on Reddit who like worked for a school district that was invested in these clocks, and I actually got them to like give me a bootleg copy of the management software. It's it's like Red Hat 5. It's a real hassle. There's like a license file it needs. I gave up. The thing is, you don't need the management platform. Like you just with these SNS clocks, you just don't. They work fine with a huge asterisk that I'll get to in a minute, totally without having the management software running. You can just point them in a normal SNS server. So I think we're good. I think we're good now. The network interface is up, and I used to be just like a total Windows person, and it's been years since I've used Windows regularly now. There's probably some other way I'm supposed to check this, but we'll just see. Yeah, we got an IP address. These do DHCP. So that's a way to tell if you're in programming mode successfully, is you should get an IP address of 192.168.1.100 assigned by the clock. Okay, so I had to do a hard cut there because I had the wrong programming tool. One of the mini traps you will fall into, there is a Primex device configuration tool that does not work with the SNS clocks. It only works with clocks that have a USB interface for programming. If you have a clock with an Ethernet interface for programming, which is all of the SNS clocks, you have to use the Primex SNS configuration tool. Um, so basically, we're in programming mode. I checked this, the clock has assigned the computer an IP address. So we launched the SNS tool. It asks for a password, Primex1 with a capital P. Should work. That is the default. We hit connect, socket connection established. That's what we want to see. Perfect. So basically, what we are going to do is set the Wi-Fi network info in this wireless primary tab. Try to type this right because it's a little bit of a hassle if you get it wrong. I'm going to set our time zone, which is going to be mountain. We don't need to mess with really anything else except for setting the NTP server. For our NTP server, just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to set that to pool.ntp.org because that should work, basically anywhere as long as it's got an internet connection. And we don't really need to change anything else. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit write configuration. Um, this is like, I mean, as you can see, it's not like this is really complicated once you get it working. It's hard to find the tool. You have to really dig it out of the like legacy part of Primex's website. You got to run it on Windows, which if you're me is kind of a hassle. You got to try like 3 times to get the clock to start in programming mode. It's a whole little thing. But this says configuration written to device, device disconnected. That's what we want to see. Um, Once the clock, there's so many things that are weird about the network interface on these. I think it's one of those situations where the microcontroller in this doesn't have a real network stack. They're kind of faking it. So a lot of stuff behaves weird. Like if you leave it sitting in programming mode for a while, the Ethernet link will drop again because I don't know, it times out or something. I don't know. The point is, I kind of thought these were supposed to reset after you write the configuration, but it often seems like they don't. So I'm just gonna disconnect the network cable. The link, I think, dropped anyway. And then I'm gonna push the green button once, which I believe should cause the clock to reset. I can't totally remember if that's right, so if that doesn't work, then what I'll do is I'll hold the button. Yeah, because we're still going slow on the second hand, right? Let's see, we got a beep there. So I think I'm trying to remember with these analog clocks what the the normal startup sequence is. For the digital ones, they basically, once they beep 4 times, you're good. So, okay, perfect, we're good. So once it starts doing this, that means that it has finished. I don't think these do full NTP, I think they just do SNTP. So it's connected to the Wi-Fi, it has gotten the time, and it is now actually setting itself to display the correct time. Here's the thing, the second hand is driven independently from the minutes hand, but the hour hand is not. The hour hand is just geared to the minutes hand, and it has like a 0 position sensor at noon. So it's actually, I don't think it's going to go directly to the correct time, which it's almost 2. It's in the early afternoon. I believe it's going to have to 0 at noon and then go to the correct term or like home at noon. And as you can see, that'll actually take several minutes. So I'm not going to sit here for the whole thing. Yep, that's going to take several minutes. Maybe I'll leave the recording running and speed it up. That might be kind of fun. Certainly, this is some unusual clock behavior. Okay, so it was kind of a strange journey there, but this is now displaying the correct local time, and it gets this over the network. So if I were to remove the batteries and put them back in, it would repeat that setup sequence to home and then get to the correct time. And just, I'll hang it up on the wall basically, and on an ongoing basis, about every 24 hours, it will repeat synchronization. Normally you won't see anything happen on the clock face when it does that because the amount of drift over 24 hours is very small, so it'll just step the second hand slightly faster or slower to close up any error. Um, and that's basically it, right? Like how cool is that? This is just kind of a standard battery powered wall clock. You hang it up, it always shows the correct time. I have put several of these up right next to each other before, and several independent clocks via NTP will synchronize themselves accurately enough that you cannot perceive the difference between them. They all appear to be ticking in perfect synchronization, which is extremely satisfying to see. As I said, the batteries last for about a year. You can configure them to synchronize less frequently. I think every 3 days and every 7 days are the other options. That will extend the battery life because they use a lot more power. Basically they totally shut off the network interface when they're not actively synchronizing themselves. So that sounds pretty great, right? Have a wall clock that is always correct. Why do I say that I don't recommend buying one of these? Well, I said two reasons. I'm going to make it three reasons. Number one is just that they're fiddly to deal with. Primex has not sold these for a long time. It's kind of a pain to find the documentation and programming tool. I had to kind of figure some stuff out from forum threads to figure out how to get these into programming mode because the manual is a little vague on it, and there's also multiple revisions of these clocks, and it's kind of hard to find the correct manual for the correct revision. Different identical clocks that I have are running different software revisions. Number two, they are old enough that they're starting to develop problems, like the two that I have at least that will lose their programming if the battery is dead for very long. And number three, and here's the big problem, I said that you don't need the management platform for these, and you don't, except, as far as I can tell, the only way that these get correct daylight savings time start and end dates is from the enterprise management software. So my clocks that I have running without being connected to the management platform, they are stepping forward and back for daylight savings time at completely nonsensical times. As much as maybe 2 weeks off, you would think that they're just using the old time before it was changed in 2009 or something, because these clocks are older than that. But it's weirder than that. Like every clock will change to daylight savings time at a different time, and they're like seemingly random number of days before and after the correct date. I have a feeling that maybe what's happening is that the daylight savings time start and end is actually stored as like a Unix timestamp offset, so it's landing at kind of random points. I don't really know. It's just nonsensical. And I mentioned that I got in touch with someone who worked for a school district with these clocks. The reason that I found him is because he posted on Reddit about having the exact same problem, that their Primex clocks had just started changing for daylight savings time at completely nonsensical points. And he was, I think, having a hard time fixing it, even with the management software up and running. So, yeah, Primex SNS clocks, cool, but I think the window of it being a good idea to pick up a bunch of these for your house has closed, and I am now figuring out alternate solutions for my own purposes. So, what are those alternate solutions? This is what my replacement looks like. This is a a video wall tile. It's got like a Raspberry Pi Zero W and the Adafruit hat for driving these. 3D printed case, I think all in, this is probably $80 or $90 worth of parts. So it's not as cheap as those Primex clocks were, but it's still cheaper than than a 200 some dollar replacement analog clock. This is just running a piece of software that I wrote to drive the matrix. I'm probably going to open source that. I think it's already visible on my GitLab. Uh, it's not, it's got like hard coded configuration and stuff right now. It's kind of junky. I need to do more work on it. But I don't know, it looks fairly nice. It shows the time and date, and it is also NTP synchronized.